Hi, it's Brett Cowell, and today I'm here with Jennifer Wester, artist, entrepreneur, and professional skater, and we're going to talk about creativity.
Awesome. My favorite subject.
So you do so many creative things. When did you first realize that might be creative?
I believe when I was little, I really knew that I loved solving problems and making questions to get more solutions. I didn't connect that to the context of creativity until I was an adult. Verbally connecting those two, it just seemed so natural to ask more questions and find more answers. And then other people started telling me that's creativity, which didn't change the fact that I loved it.
So, as I said in the intro, you're an artist, entrepreneur, and a skater. Now, all of those are creative in their own ways. Do you have a single creative identity, or is it a different type of creativity process?
No, I don't have a single identity at all. And I realized that when I was posed with this project at school, actually, because I was an old undergrad, and we were doing a graphic design project where I needed to create an identity for something or someone. And I decided I wanted to do a personal identity campaign and figure out what my identity was going to be. Was I going to be a skater? Was I going to be a seamstress? Was I going to be an entrepreneur? And in the end, I came to this concept of so many facets that all I needed to figure out was how I wanted the thread to connect through them. And that's still how I think of myself, is more this curvy line through a whole bunch of subjects and identities. Somehow that's one.
One of the things I think a lot of people struggle with is first believing that holds them back from being creative is not believing that they're a creative person, or they might know an artist such as yourself that seems to be doing so many things, and they think, look, I'm not like her, so therefore I'm not creative. What advice do you have to people to work out whether they are creative to get started?
Well, I think everyone's creative in some level, and they just haven't contextualized it or accepted that ability, like you said, because they have preconceived notions about what creativity means. So when people have this preconceived notion about what creativity means, they often attach it to an artistic expression of some sort, something that's classically considered a creative. But at the end of the day, I think it's about finding where you like to go question. And normally when you find where you like to go question things, you find how you like to solve problems. And at that point is when the creative process starts, right? That's where you find your strength, and how are you creatively solving your problems. There's your platform of creativity.
So maybe the first step in working out whether you're creative is to work out if you've got any problems. To be able to see your problems and then work out and try and solve them. Is problem solving a key part of creativity?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think creativity is creating questions. It's creating questions that make you go find answers. And when if you find answers / finding solutions is the core of creativity. Why are we creative? Because we need to solve a problem in our head about, I need this to be visually represented in the world. I need a way to slice an apple in one move. I don't know, any of these things that have been invented in the world have come from a desire to solve a problem.
So let's talk about the transition to entrepreneur. Actually, you've been an entrepreneur of one form or another probably for your whole life.
I think so. Yes.
So we're going to talk about the Art B project, and I think it fits in nicely with our discussion about problem solving. So do you want to talk about, this is another key thing in creativity, the pivot from ideas into reality. And let's use Art B as an example. Maybe explain how Art B came about.
So Art B was definitely a solving problems moment. I am a mom of 2 little kids, and I think any parent knows that fear that strikes whenever you realize you have a long break from school or an activity, and you have to keep these kids happy and engaged with something over that time, or you will have your house torn apart and maybe all of your hair. So I was at that moment right before a Christmas break. Happened to be that the school that my kids were going to needed a fundraiser at the same time. So I had these two problems to solve, and I was trying to do it in one shot. And I ended up walking in the classroom saying, "How do you guys do it? And what can I take home to solve my problem? And if I can package that in some way, we have our fundraiser." So the answer came with supplies that I really had written off, and it was lucky that I was asking the questions so openly in the classroom of just show me all the ways that they stay entertained during the day. Because I had written off paper and pens, and we came to the paper table, and I realized that I didn't need to be lumping paper and pens together, that there were other things they were doing with paper that were interesting. They were interesting for me. It's satisfying to go change paper in other ways than just drawing on it. And that's how Art B got formed, was I said, okay, I can take a piece of paper now and fold it and crumple it and tear it and cut it. And what can I create that would make that action just a little more interesting and just a little more satisfying? And then tested it on my kids. And so Art B is a series of books that are geared to make people challenge what they expected from an activity and how they approach giving kids fine motor skills, right? Because at the end of the day, pens are not the only way that we express our motor skills, or especially our fine motor skills. And when you get into many careers later on, you're building models of something if you're an architect, or you're figuring out how to frame a shot if you're doing videography. All of those are taking dexterity and visual motor connectivity and spatial awareness and putting them together into just a seamless life. When we're little, we need that same spark. So when you get that spark to start creating, you get more and more engaged with finding the next solution and finding the next answer and continuing to develop your own ideas. So Art B is all about that.
So I want to come back to the creative spark in a second. But let's talk a little bit more about how you moved from concept to reality, because this series of kid-directed, or it's not just for kids, it's for adults too. I hear, and I've certainly I've experienced. It's quite fun to play. It feels like play and learn at the same time with your kids. So
it's turned into not just for kids, and so that's been brilliant. It's been amazing. This has been one of those projects. This has been one of those projects where you start with something that you really just want to have happen, and then see where it takes you. And this has taken me on this great ride. So that first fundraiser book, I pushed to publish in 7 days, and we sold it for the fundraiser. And people were so engaged by it, especially the teachers were saying, "I want to use this in our classroom." And we have a really small school, so I was thinking, okay, this is a tiny sample size, but I really want to make another book. And at that point, just things that I could do with the paper on my kitchen counter were engaging me so much that every night there were just piles of paper being cut and torn apart on my kitchen table. And so I went from that first one to wanting to spread it out to all my friends. And as soon as I did that, people started coming to me and saying, "My kids that have autism need to use this, that my kids that have dyslexia need to use this, my father needs to use this." And people started applying it in different ways that I just said, okay, yes, how do I keep designing to engage this broader spectrum of users and make just really good design? Because I thought, this is about creating for diversity. When I had that moment, that happens to hit on a passion I had a long time ago as well, for just thinking about what normal is and what the spectrum of diversity and people are. And I started realizing nobody was doing that in activity books. So it seemed natural to say, okay, just start producing, start getting it out there, and see what comes back.
So the creative process that you've described so far is starting with a problem, and then it seemed that what comes next is does the spark come first or the problem, and then you scan up all the resources you have available.
Well, there's a saying that artists love parameters, right? And I think that's really accurate. It's similar to walking into a store where you just have too many choices and suddenly you're paralyzed, you don't know what to do. So I think there is that need to figure out either what's motivating you for the solution or a really clear understanding of the problem to, maybe that's the same thing, to start to give yourself the parameters of going forward, right? Sometimes you have a question that you feel like's been answered a million times, and then you need to start asking, okay, what are assumptions that are being made about this question? How can I make this into a lot more questions? That's not always easy to do, but that's what happened in this case, where I had assumed paper couldn't be the solution because I'd purchased millions, maybe exaggerating, but a lot of activity books for my kids, and I just felt like they had first page, scribble, scrabble, throw it away, or stickers involved, and I was just like, why is this the answer? Because it's not working. And so I had to keep rewinding the question into more questions and more questions. Why is paper interesting? Why is paper not interesting? When I just kept questioning, I ended up starting more sparks. So the sparks that I needed to go forward came out of creating a new question.
So it seems like a deadline was instrumental in this process happening, because a lot of people get stuck at idea stage. So you'd seen the problem there and had some inspiration, spark of inspiration to try and solve it at a deadline, and also the school fundraisers. There was a number of problems going there, and I think a lot of people get stuck at idea stage and don't get it. What was also nice, and maybe you can talk about this, is that you didn't immediately draw up a funding proposal and try and get $1 million to do this and go, I need a printing press before I can do anything. What happened straight away to actually bring this idea into reality?
Right. Well, there's right. So there's good advice that you should get a prototype out on whatever platform you can, quick, and just fail early and fail often until you find that solution. So that's been a process that I've always embraced. And then deadlines are definitely a great motivator for me. At the minimum, I put a deadline on myself that I need to be able to add this to a portfolio book or some kind of something that substantiates the fact that I had this idea, and this is my internal voice saying, in 5 years, if somebody else does this, do I want to be able to say, oh yeah, I thought about that, and then how would I show that I thought about that? That may sound flippant, as if I'm not going to be the person that succeeds with it, but I feel like at the end of the day, every creative project that is not based on somebody else's deadlines for me has that little motivator in the backside of the project saying, when you want to talk about this or show someone that you did this or just remember this thought, what do you have to show for it? And that pushes me to finish a process. Whether or not it's a mosaic that I started underneath the stairs of my house, which I did. And I remember somebody saying, well, it's okay if you don't finish it right now. You can come back to it. It's your house. And I said, no, I can't post a photo and show my friends that I did this if I don't finish it. So I'm going to finish it right now. That's a kind of self-imposed deadline. And I think those are helpful.
I think there's a quiz circulating around, like 20 questions to work out whether you're creative. Now, I think you could look at that in any number of ways. Like, I think it'd be nice to be the sort of person that's not spending your creative time doing quizzes to work out whether you're creative or not. And I think one of the questions is, do you have ideas that eventually get made into products by someone else that actually get implemented. That's one of the questions on there, and I think a lot of people might put themselves in that category. They see a need or a problem and think, wouldn't it be good if we did something about that? Or maybe, this might be a way that we can solve it. Well, what I liked about what you were saying is just that extra tiny step, but critical step in actually making something in whatever format to convert that idea into the first tiny step, micro step of reality. And I think that's the big difference.
I think that also gives you the moment of understanding of whether or not you're really interested in solving the rest of the problems to bring that to market. So once I did that first book, and I thought, you know what, the idea is going to be out there, and I will have done one thing that gets it in front of this little group of people, and then maybe I'll understand if I ever want to do this again or never want to do it again. And I think for me that oftentimes has been the clarity moment where I say, okay, I thought about it, and if somebody else creates this idea, I'll be happy to be like, oh yeah, I thought that was a great idea too. And know within myself that at the end of the day I had decided, but I didn't want to take the steps to make it happen. Mm-hmm. That gives me a lot of pride at the same time of I think it's the responsible way to treat my life, because I'm not bashing myself about not having spent time on an idea that may have been really great, but I did enough to understand that I wasn't motivated to go further.
So just to finish up, what's your one piece of advice for people that want to take their first micro step into creativity?
So this is a trite statement, just do it. No, but find a little question that you can answer today. Find a question that seems like such a microscopic problem that you can find a solution for in the next 20 minutes. If you like what you found as a solution, you're probably likely to want to find the next question in that problem and solve it, and the next one, and the next one, and you'll take it from there. If you don't like it, you'll stop doing it, and you'll move on to the next thing that sparks an interest in you, and you'll find out if you're interested in following that path. If you just leave them as big problems, it's so hard to prioritize. It's just a halt right there, and you're standing in front of 5 doors, and you don't know which one to open. So the first step is finding the peephole.
I like that. Jennifer Wester, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.